Hello, hello. I'll give everyone a moment to connect to audio here. Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1308th New Social Environment. I'm Joshua, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Eve L. Ewing, Andrea Faye Hart, Trina Reynolds-Tyler, and Cole Swensen. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Eve L. Ewing is a co-owner of Build Coffee and Books, where she also leads the bookselling team. She's a scholar and cultural organizer from Chicago and a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author. Her books include, most recently, Original Sins, The Miseducation of Black and Native Children and the Construction of American Racism. She also authored the poetry collections Electric Arches in 1919, the nonfiction work Ghosts in the Schoolyard, and a novel for young readers, Maya and the Robot. She has written several projects for Marvel Comics, notably Ironheart and Black Panther, and is currently writing X-Men United. She lives, works, reads, and drinks coffee on the south side of Chicago. Andrea Faye Hart is a co-owner of Build Coffee and Books and a radical queer Quaker who believes Chicago is the center of the universe. For nearly 2 decades, she has worked as a media-based organizer, helping transform the journalism landscape by co-founding City Bureau in Chicago, growing MLK 50 Justice Through Journalism in Memphis, and serving as the inaugural membership director at Tiny News Collective. She holds a master's in divination from Vanderbilt Divinity School, where she served as the first chaplain intern for the program for LGBTQ health and as transformative justice facilitator. A 2019 Northwestern University Catalyst for Change in Writing honoree, she currently serves as Director of Resource Organizing at Access Reproductive Care Southeast and lives in Durham, North Carolina. Trina Reynolds-Tyler is the Data Director at the Invisible Institute, a Pulitzer Prize-winning data journalist, and a native of the South Side of Chicago. She leads Beneath the Surface, a project employing machine learning to identify gender-based violence at the hands of Chicago police. Trina works to document how communities unable to depend on the police are forced to create safety and accountability outside of the carceral state. As a data scientist, she centers the practice of narrative justice in her inquiries. Trina is an abolitionist and trained restorative justice practitioner and on the board of Southside Together, a community organization whose mission is to secure economic stability and advance human rights. And our host today, Cole Swensen, is the author of 20 volumes of poetry, most recently in And, which was longlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize, and a collection of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Cole.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And thank you all for being here. We're great to welcome you to this program, which is dedicated to honoring the people that make writing possible. And you all do that in so many great ways. And so we're going to go right into hearing your work. We'll start with a reading by Eve and then we'll have a reading by Andrea, and then we'll go into talking. Thank you, Eve.
Thanks, Joshua, and thanks, Cole, and thanks to all of you for being here. Poets, we love to read like new and unpublished things. So I'm going to read some new and unpublished things. This is from my next collection, which is currently scheduled for April 2027. And it is a collection of silly poems for children. So these are kids' poems for the young or young at heart. And I'm going to time myself. This one is called Broken Clock. Every time I'm having fun, the clock moves fast and soon I'm done. But every time I'm doing chores, the clock moves slow and I do mores. This poem is called Advice. A grape fits right up your nose, but that is not where a grape goes. Keep grapes in your belly, or else you'll have jelly every time your nose blows. This poem is called Bad Ideas for Superheroes. Gum on your shoe, man. The elbow scab. Burnt toast girl. Captain has to pee. Sleepy guy. A literal baby. Mr. Slippery. Lady Lint. The toe stubber. Nausea. This poem is for those of you that are expecting some cold weather soon. It's called The Heat Was Off. So I put on a soft sweater, but I was still cold. So I wrapped a blue blanket around my soft sweater, but I was still cold. So I tied a scarlet scarf above my blue blanket around my soft sweater, but I was still cold. So I pulled a fuzzy fleece over my scarlet scarf above my blue blanket around my soft sweater, but I was still cold, so I squeezed a toasty turtleneck atop my fuzzy fleece over my scarlet scarf above my blue blanket around my soft sweater, but I was still cold, so I snuggled my cozy comforter alongside my toasty turtleneck atop my fuzzy fleece over my scarlet scarf above my blue blanket around my soft sweater. But I was still cold, so I plopped on my handy down hat on my head, and with my cozy comforter alongside my toasty turtleneck atop my fuzzy fleece over my scarlet scarf above my blue blanket around my soft sweater. Now I'm too hot and I can't really move. This poem is called Fall. How long does it take a leaf to fall, and what does it feel as it does? Leaf time may not be the same as me time or you time, and leaf thoughts may not be the same as me thoughts or you thoughts. And is a leaf looking up at the sky, at a cloud that threatens to rain, a warm and needed rain, or down to its leaf friends waiting below, calling, "Come to us, come"? Or is a leaf looking at nothing at all, only waiting, waiting for the end of the fall? This poem is called Thank You Poem. I'm going to dedicate this to my two co-owners. The three of us have a very active prayer practice. Many of our problems as business owners are like, well, we're just going to have to pray. So this poem is called Thank You Poem. It doesn't really matter who you sit and say your thank yous to. As long as you, with breath or pen, let out a thank you now and then. Thanks for knees and things that fly, and guts and sweet potato pie, and thanks for cartwheels and for whistles, dogs and dirt and toothbrush bristles. Thanks for boogers. Thanks for trains. Thanks for socks and candy canes. Thanks for moms and dads and pears and funny jokes and underwears. For learning how to count to 10 and times you fell and rose again. A gasp of air, a beating heart, a friendly friend, confusing art, a real good hug, good food for eating, and any poems that's worth reading. That's worth reading. In your own loud or quiet way, you bring a blooming to the day with every thank you that you say. I'm going to say thank you to you all, and I'll read one more. This poem is called Somewhere, Someone, Somewhen. Just right now, or sometime soon, or maybe then, or somewhen, somewhere, just there, there is someone not just like you, but like you too, right now, close or far from where you are, reading this poem, not so near enough to hear, and even though you may not know this so and so, it'd still be nice to say hello. Let's whisper low. 3, 2, 1, go. Hello. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a lovely way to start. And Andrea, if you could continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us again. Just a bit of context for what I'm about to read, just very quickly. So, in 2020, I blew up my whole life to go to divinity school. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I've always been pretty spiritual. And I had been, I'm from Chicago. I'd been doing organizing work for 15 years there. But there was actually an experience that I had in Clarksdale in Cleveland, Mississippi, that is my sort of like call story. Everybody who goes to divinity school has a call story. And I felt a move to want to understand spiritual organizing a little bit better. So I landed in Nashville for divinity school and then eventually graduated and moved to Memphis, where while I was there, I was asked to guest preach at Bunton Presbyterian Church. It's a progressive white congregation church. I was asked to guest preach while the pastor was on maternity leave. So this is an excerpt of a sermon that I gave in April 2024. Yeah, the readings that day were Acts 8, which talks about the wilderness road, and it was paired with uh, 1 John chapter 4, which talks about love without fear. So, and then I think the only other thing I'll say is I'm actually like a recovering Catholic turned radical Quaker, so we don't speak in meeting when we do. So anyway, so yeah, so giving a sermon was not really how I imagined preaching, but sometimes you find yourself there. So, all right. The wilderness road is where we find an unlikely pairing. First, there's Philip, a lesser known apostle, likely still reeling from the death of his friend Jesus, and he is tasked with the responsibility to spread the teaching of his friend. And then there's the Ethiopian eunuch, who is of high standing, a court official who is in charge of the entire treasury. I chuckle at the thought of Philip being told to go down an unknown road on foot by some angel who's like, go running after this chariot. I laugh because running on an unknown road alongside horses reminded me of my own calling to chaplaincy and the undoing of a life I thought I was going to lead forever in Chicago. I gave up a nonprofit I had co-started, the most money anyone in my family had ever made, and I headed south. I was overwhelmed with grief and imagination. And it's fair to say that Philip, too, is also filled with an immense grief as the world had just cheered on the murder of his radical friend. And I think it's also easy for us to forget that when Philip is out delivering the word, there is no institutionalized Christian faith as we know it today. He is meeting people where they are at, organizing a collective of outcasts like Jesus had done. Here, the wilderness road is a place to build relationships, however brief, in a way that explicitly upends the hierarchy and isolation that is necessary to uphold a society rooted in empire. That is to say, what Philip is doing is a risk, so much so that later in life he's martyred for this very thing, for crossing these very same lines, for disrupting the status quo of empire. And yet here he is willing. What the wilderness road, Philip, and eunuch remind us is that any day, anywhere, there is an opportunity to share a kind of radical love and faith that disrupts empire. What I love especially is that Philip's posture as a teacher is not one of domination. He begins his lesson to the eunuch with a question. Do you understand what you are reading? He does not start with, let me tell you about the Lord. And the eunuch in return says, how can I unless someone guides me? This is truly a vulnerable moment of sharing power. Philip, like all good teachers, is learning in real time here as well. He is making sense of how to carry out what Jesus taught him and how to apply it. And again, this conversation is rooted in curiosity, and it leads us to perhaps the most intimate exchange in the entire scripture, a baptism. Once the baptism is complete, instead of getting back into the cushioned ride with the eunuch, the Spirit of the Lord snatches Philip away for what? More work. This is the reward for breaking through the noise of empire and performing a holy baptism of new possibility. More work. Philip is a reminder that the work of our radical faith is never complete, and neither are we if we choose to journey on the wilderness road. And what does it mean to be on the wilderness road today? Where in our society do we see this reclaiming of the wilderness road as resistance to empire? When the Ethiopian eunuch proclaimed, look, here is water, right before his baptism, I immediately heard the chants of students across college campuses singing down by the riverside. The song was originally an enslaved spiritual, more than a century later was picked up as a protest song against the Vietnam War. But it began as a song about a spiritual war that would eventually become the Civil War, a protest against the consumption of Black bodies justified by a faith that was now rooted in upholding empire. The enslaved refused to be the master's tools and instead offered a vision of faith rooted in justice, and which grows all the more valuable and relevant today. While some of the lyrics have changed over the years, the refrain largely stays the same. I lay down my sword and shield. I ain't gonna study war no more. And it's interesting how the positionality of the singer changes what that refrain means. What these students who are calling for solidarity with Palestine, who are coming from all races, religions, genders, and classes, are reminding us is that when it comes to upholding a war on an empire, we are all soldiers even if we are not on the front lines. Our hearts, our minds, and our spirits were divinely given. To use them to uphold a genocide or a war is not the way. We were not meant to consume one another. We were meant to be compassionate to one another and to ourselves. When I sit with these words, I appreciate how the song forces me to confront my own complicity. I acknowledge that I am imperfect and susceptible to the trappings of empire. I lay down what turns me into a weapon against my siblings or my neighbors, and I ask for forgiveness in the water. And while I am unsure if I'm ready for whatever comes on this wilderness road, I know, like Philip, I am willing. That's it.
Thank you so much. What a great start. And now let's segue into hearing about Build Coffee and Books. Uh, Maybe one of you can tell us about how you chose the building, how it came about.
Okay, so Build was separately, independently, our favorite. Maybe I'm speaking for everyone.
Go
Our
ahead.
favorite coffee shop in the city of Chicago. It is located in the Woodlawn community on 61st and Blackstone in the Experimental Station. Now, Build Coffee and Books was initially created by Hannah Neihart and her bestie, Bia. Forgive me, Bia, for
Mousky,
Mowski.
Mousky. Mhm.
Thank you very much. And they were U Chicago grads. Bia's like, I'm on the books. Hannah's like, I'm in the shop running the coffee and things. And that was in 2017. Fast forward to 2024,
Yeah,
2025.
2024, yeah.
Hannah is like, it's time. The coffee shop, there's an article that comes out in Block Club Chicago. Build is looking for a new owner. And um, I get it. We all feel the inkling to purchase Build, but we know that we can't do it alone. I think that's where I'll start.
I can pick up from there because I feel like it's such a Chicago story. Chicagoans are very in each other's business, and we're, I think, very relational. I say this as like a sociologist who's also married to a non-Chicagoan, so I spend a lot of time thinking about like our comparative culture. And Chicagoans are very, we lean a lot on like the prior existing deep relationships that you have with people. And so I saw that Hannah was thinking about selling Build, and I was really thinking about it from the book side. And I was thinking, when they first co-founded the shop, that the books part had been very vibrant. And then the last few recent time, Bia had moved on to the New York Times. So she was still a co-owner, but the books part was kind of like, I think of it as like a fallow garden a little bit, overgrown in some places, undertended in other places. And so I talked to Hannah like, hey, I feel like we could really make this bookstore thriving. And at that time, she asked me to, sign an NDA because we're talking about like sensitive business matters. And I was like, this is just a conversation. We're just chatting. I'm not committing to anything. So we both agreed that we would keep the conversation completely secret. And we met in the patio of Build, and we're like, don't tell anybody. We mutually agree this. And a couple days later, I get a text from Trina Reynolds-Tyler, like, heard you might be buying Build. I was like, what in the world? And of course, somebody had seen us in the patio. Somebody said something to Trina. So Trina and I said, well, let's just chat. And she said, what would you think if I brought in Andrea Faye Hart? And I was like, Andrea, I love Andrea. Like, she's dope. I've respected her for years. I've respected Trina for years. And so the three of us sat down and started to talk about it. But I think it's a very Chicago thing. It's also a very feminist thing in the sense that like the three of us were not we all knew each other and respected each other, but we had no prior business relationship. What we had was this years of accumulated trust and a commitment to community. And we kind of agreed that our job, if we were going to take this on, was to nourish and sustain the community that was already there, which includes like the staff, the people that rely on the shop, and then think about ways to make it sustainable and help it thrive. So we are three co-owners that do not pull a salary. We don't make any money from the business. We make a lot of reward, and our job is to run a business that doesn't lose money. It's like so yeah, that's my I don't know, Andrew, if you want to jump in on your part of the origin story or how how Trina got your connect, but yeah, secrets aren't so secret where we come from.
No, they're not. No, I mean, I think just to kind of underline the point that Build had been around for like 7 or 8 years, and each of us had played a role in its history and sort of helping facilitate the community that was there. And so, Hannah refers to us, would refer to us as A1s. And part of that was, just like I used to host a weekly workshop series in the space, and Eve hosted the first one, and Trina hosted the 67th one. And I think that it's, in addition to like playing other roles outside of that with Build itself. And so what's really beautiful is that, and what I really appreciate and admire about both of them is that, yes, we want to run a successful business and we want to nourish the immediate neighborhood around us. We also want to continue it to be like a politically fortifying space for people in whatever way that means for them. And then, for me, as somebody who left Chicago in 2020, but goes back because my family is there, I have this longer interest around building really solid infrastructure and collaborations between like Build and what it does and places in the South that are sort of parallel or aligned. But I will stop there because I think I know we have more that we're talking about. So.
I feel like the detail that also matters here is that Andrea texted when Andrea also saw the news, she texted me and was like,
I did.
Tee hee hee, what if we bought Bill? And I was like, give me 1 month because I'm thinking about it too. And then 1 month later, I heard about the Eve, situation.
Yeah.
And I said, assemble the dream team. So,
And I happened to be home when they were meeting. Like I was supposed to be at a work conference and I just dipped and my boss didn't know where I was. I was like, I have to go take a call. And I just got an Uber to Hyde Park and met with them.
What a great beginning story. What a spark. I think there are other images, right? Somebody want to tell us what this one's about?
Yeah, I can jump in. I think that you know, bookstores, we live in a city that has a lot of really thriving independent bookstores and in a neighborhood that has higher than most per capita thriving independent bookstores. And so it's really important for us to think about what is the unique thing that we offer as Build. And we're a very small space with a very established food program and coffee program. So we have truly incredible food. Chef Christian Sutter is the head of our food program. It's really amazing. I think a lot of people are kind of surprised to know how good our food is. Something that one of our baristas said early on is like sometimes when people think of community spaces, they subconsciously think about poor quality food, poor quality coffee, and there's a way that that is seen as like a privilege or something that is like you can't have both. And we try to build a space that is very welcoming that also has excellence in the food we serve and the coffee we serve. But as I mentioned, the book side of it had kind of fallen to the wayside, and the shop is only 740 square feet. And so I actually, as a author, and as a books girly, I really kind of appreciate the curatorial challenge of saying, like, the books, Build is not a place where you're going to come and you know for a fact that like the latest best-selling fiction piece is going to be there. You're actually going to see really intentionally curated books. Every single book on our shelf I have personally chosen to be there for a reason. The note cards and the stickers that we sell are all locally produced, and I've personally curated them to be there for a reason. And so we're really committed to trying to use books in support of the political purposes that Andrea mentioned. How can they be a catalyst for learning and a catalyst for people to strengthen relationships? And then on the right is one of our regulars who's about 3 or 4 years old, colored this page. And we all really love kids. And one of my earliest impressions of Trina was there was this video of her that kind of went viral of her on one Halloween on the West Side where she became like kind of like a Halloween candy lady fairy godmother, I guess you could say, where she was like individually greeting all these kids who came to her house for Halloween candy. And it went viral because she was so sweet and so engaging and so loving. So another thing we really want to build is a space where young folks feel welcome. And so this we have like coloring pages, we have toys, we have magnetiles, we had Santa come visit us in winter, and there were some parents that came from the total opposite end of the city, and they said, it's really important to have a space like this. So yeah, really just trying to think about how to use books and other things as resources to get people together. There's me and Santa. That is the real Santa, by the way. He came. Any other Santas you may have seen that day were not real Santa. That's me with the real Santa and his bell.
I,
Great.
I think there are actually quite a few pictures of the book, some book clubs that we've had. If you want to pull those up, Joshua, just as Eve is mentioning these book clubs, I believe this is the Baldwin Book Club.
Yeah, this is Baldwin
Yes,
Book Club.
yes. There's another one of some folks holding books. Yep,
Yeah,
come on, brother.
this is the Visible Men Reading Book Club. And so, or Visible Men Review, pardon me. So this is a book club of Black men. And what's cool about this is that this is a group that already existed and we just opened the space for them. And so we are doing that. We had our a first run of the year. It was like 20 degrees and we went on a 5K run with a group in Chicago called Read and Run. And we've done letter writing days with folks that support incarcerated people in and around Chicago. And we have another book club called Black Girls Read Chicago, which is coming. So I think part of our mission is to also think about making space for folks that are already doing this work in Chicago. And all of us as organizers know how much space can really be at a premium. So that's a way that we can serve our community.
Mhm. Andrea?
These are old. These are you can skip through this one and the other two. These
No,
are
you
I
no,
think
nice
they're
try. Go back.
wonderful. Like,
No.
come
She tried
on.
it. She tried it. Go ahead. She tried it. Nice try.
Thank you. So from like 2016 up until 2020, I was helping facilitate what was called the public newsroom. So it was a weekly workshop series housed under the civic journalism organization City Bureau. And so these are some of the photos of what I was mentioning around those workshops. So I would plug in when running a weekly workshop series is absolutely insane, but I think it's very worth it, especially when you have different speakers. It was grateful, as Eve was saying, like to have a space like Build. So before Build even was able to really open for business, like we were kind of hosting things in the space. I love you, Eve. I see you in the chat. And so, yeah, so this is from a training that I was doing. One of the things that we also did at City Bureau, and they still do, is train and pay people to monitor local government. And so it was my job to train people to do that. And so this is a sort of know your rights, like when you're sitting in a meeting, like what are you supposed to document, da 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 da. And then now go to the next one. And so Eve hosted our first workshop and it was really important. And the reason we wanted it was coming out of a lot of the work that she had done, especially the Ghost in the Schoolyard book, like thinking about who controls narrative, who tells stories, and the meaning making that happens, and the normalizing that happens, and the power that gets displaced or overlooked when certain people are telling certain stories and other people aren't. And so it was really important for us, if like the point of this workshop series was to give people a space to like take action, to learn something, maybe to be a little uncomfortable, and then like do something with that discomfort. Having her as the first person was really important because it really set the tone, I think, for like what are we doing and why are we doing this and how is this different from other workshop series. It's also funny, you can tell how early it is because there's no Build logo in the chalkboard behind you. And then the next one, you can't see Andrea Ritchie. She's sitting next to Trina, but the people are blocking her. But basically, I think this might have been, you could correct me, Trina. I think this was 2018. Okay, thank you. Somewhere around there. Yes, our hairstyles. We need to all be
This is a retrospective on our various hair colors, styles, lengths.
So, Trina, I think Trina, you came to us with this idea you really wanted to bring Andrea Ritchie, her book Invisible No More was coming out. It was looking at underreporting of Black women and girls being harmed by police. And so this was a really important conversation. We had many conversations about police misconduct in the city, and we were really grateful for Trina to bring this conversation around like, okay, and now here's this other layer, and here's the data in Chicago, and how do we think about this, and how do we talk about this, and how do we check our own like sort of ignorance around this. And so Trina hosted that conversation with Andrea Ritchie to talk about the book, but then to really, she loves data, to also talk about like what does it look like.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trina.
Well,
Go
no,
ahead.
that was literally like I was like heading into grad school so that I could learn about data science in order to employ machine learning on police misconduct records. And like Invisible No More, this book, she's talking about these kind of narratives that are just gathered across, these different places. And we're in the city of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, where police misconduct records are public information, and we could literally pull those records and do our own a thorough investigation into sexual violence at the hands of police. And I think this was a part of my launch pad into, this career this place that I'm in now. Invisible Institute is right above Build Coffee and Books. And so when I go to work, I'm like, I'm downstairs. What's up, y'all? I'm upstairs. What's up? And then I get to kind of percolate between the two. And I'm very honored for the opportunity and for the just incredible team and his history of the space alone. You can go to the next one. I feel like, yeah, that's another book club photo. I feel like that was our first one
Yeah,
right
that was
out
our
front.
Marsha biography book club. One thing about these book clubs is all of them are led by we have one being led by a staff member in 5 days. It's the YA book club. But prior to that, all of them have been led by community members. And so build is not just a cute name. Really our what we see the space as a way of building collective capacity and so it's important, like for folks that might want to run a book club or run an event, to have an opportunity to build their muscle there and then also to build relationships with one another. So S. Simmons, who's in the middle with the black baseball hat, led this amazing book club of Marsha, which was a biography of Marsha P. Johnson. Oh, and something else that's kind of cool about our book clubs is that, I'm no Trina Reynolds-Tyler, but I do mess around with a spreadsheet behind the scenes here and there. And so the way we've set up all of our book clubs is that you can basically choose 3 levels of entry. So, well, 4. One is you just bring your own book. You got it from the library. You got it from some other place. The second is that you pay the list price of the book. The third is that you have a little extra coin and you pay for your book and somebody else's book. And then the fourth is that you get the book completely for free. So every single book club, we have a certain number of folks that show up and get a free book from us that they get to keep, brand new book, and they get to participate. And so that's one of the ways in which we're, kind of using our collective resources to support each other.
Mhm.
Same thing, our book club, our young adult book club that's coming up in 5 days is led by one of our amazing staff members. And all of the teens in our community are going to get those books that participate. They're all getting those books for free through relationships with teachers and other community folks, where basically, me and some of my homies were like just shaking people down for money so that they bought all the books and then the teens will get those books for free.
Great.
Thank you. I feel like this is a really nice picture of like our farmers market on Saturdays. Like if you come to the experimental station, 61st Street Market, in the summertime, it's every Saturday. In the winter, it goes indoors. It's like once a month. Right now we're in our indoor season. You will see that like as soon as 9 o'clock hits, which is when Build opens its window, because we sell from the window during that time. The line is all the way down the block. And then there's an image here of our lovely barista, coffee lead, and another staff wearing our Build merch, these hats that we sell, but also representing Harold Washington colleges, because we all believe in education and we are not, we're all about that, like feeding our minds. And at every institution we're representing in Chicago, from the community colleges to the U Chicagos and the Northwesterns. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is our little kitty corner. Unidentified child playing with a little toy box in the cut. There's a jump rope over there. There's like actually conveniently, the children's books are located in the bottom right part of the bookshelf, which is right next to this little pink box full of puzzles and tinkering things. Just because like in the kitty corner, we want to make things accessible. We really pride ourselves. We know a lot of people with babies. We know there are a lot of places that are not children friendly, that are not baby friendly. And so we do what we can to offer our customers just a little something that their children can explore and play with.
Maybe I'll mention zines real quick because we can see some zines in this picture as well. Excuse me. So, zines are, especially now, a really important political activation tool, a way of, for some people, sharing personal reflection, for some people sharing, mobilizing tactics. And as a professor, I use them a lot in my educating. And when I was first getting started as a baby writer, when I was, a teenager, that was the first thing I produced was a zine. And so Build sells zines. I think I'm ready to be fact checked by somebody if this is not true, but we're really one of the only places on the South Side where you can buy zines. And so we are switching over. When previously, Bia, who we mentioned earlier, is one of the co-founders, had kind of a traditional model of consignment with zines. And one of the things that we're doing in the new year in 2026 is switching over to a direct artist support model. And so basically, if you are an artist who has a zine that is aligned with our mission as a shop, we will carry it for free. We don't take any consignment. And we are having folks have their own direct payment information. So people who come into the shop can pick up a zine that they want and Venmo or Zelle or Cash App the creator directly and then take it and walk away. We don't take anything from it. And then conversely, we have a lot of zines that get produced by artists through like grants from the city or from other sources, or people that, are willing to spend a little bit of their own money just to get something out there and they're not trying to make any money back. And so they can also opt that we keep 100% of the money. So basically, if you're a person who makes a zine, you can say either Build keeps all the money or you keep all the money, no more consignment terms or anything like that. And so that's pretty exciting. A lot of these zines are currently behind me in my office as as we revamp all of that and roll everything out. But if you come to the shop, I would say by like, I don't know, first week of February, you should be able to see a pretty good collection of zines back up.
Great.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I love this photo because it is an embodiment of all of the different types of humans. We have like one of the founders of Social Works in the corner in the back here, Justin Cunnington, which is this like Chance the Rapper's like education, a nonprofit. Malik Colburn also sitting here right across from Justin, who is like a everyday person who comes to Build. And like I texted him today a photo and he said, going to Build now, he's like a regular. And then we have these two folks who are like doing some co-working together because our space is really interdisciplinary. Like Tarek Shaw here is a data scientist. And then we have Harley. Oh, Harley, I wish I had Harley's last name right now, who is like works closely with the Invisible Institute. These folks are here talking about human rights work. And, Tarek here as a data scientist is like lending some advice and information just casually, like they intersected in the shop and then now they're sitting down and both their laptops are open. I feel like that's really the energy of the shop. It's like you pull up, you stumble into someone and you get like some big ideas. Go to the next slide.
There's our farmer's market line. People in the heat. I will say, like to what Trina said, every single day that I'm in the shop, I see somebody that I know that I didn't expect to see, and I meet a new person, like every time, without exception. And I've been telling people it's kind of like the opposite of the internet. It's just like a very direct, personal way of connecting with people that feels really nourishing right now.
Ooh, okay, come through. We got the food, we have the coffee, we have a banana that says, I need you to need me. Okay. Okay, so this sandwich here, little one and two. I'm sorry. Does someone else, Andrea, do you want to speak to this? Because I want to make space for you.
No, you're fine. I love seeing you light up. It's just like very delightful. I will speak to the little one and little two because it is my favorite sandwich on the menu. And I would argue if there was a breakfast sandwich bracket in the city of Chicago, it would maybe take the championship. That is my argument. Potentially. It would at least be in the finals. But it's really delicious. It has like a slaw on it. It has chili crisp on it. It has eggs. It has delicious, perfect sourdough bread. It's just amazing. Yeah, BRB. I love you. But it's probably our most popular sandwich. And it's my favorite. I get it every time I come back. That and the kale Caesar salad is also really delicious. I get those two things every time I come. And then the middle, I don't know which drink that is. Which one is it?
I mean, it could be a cappuccino, it could be a latte. I think it's a latte. I'm just
I
looking at
know if it's in a blue cup, it's got to be a latte.
Yeah. That beautiful design.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, well, yeah, one thing is our coffee lead always makes jokes that we take bad pictures of the latte art because we'd be like, the latte art looks so good. And they're like, no, you need to get it. So this was a photo where I was like, they were like, take a picture of this one. I'm like, I got you. And then of course, like we sell bananas and And we want you to want nourishment. Like it's in the books, in the food, in the vibes. It's like we want that communal exchange of nourishment. You can go to the next slide. Oh, this is an image of me in 2017. You and build, obviously it's before this, like the sign was colored. And there's a youth police project. There's a program at the Invisible Institute, and this young person, Morgan, who is now like a grown up with a child and all the things, is interviewing me. And I thought that was very special. Like, I'm like, this person is no longer in high school. I think this image is from when she was in high school, and now she's a grown person. And it just goes to show how long just like this kind of engagement with the door is an entirely new color, but there have been so many people who have come through Build, not knowing, even in this moment, I had no idea that I would one day be co-owner. You can go, is there any other slides here? Are we? I think
there was one more at the end.
I think that's maybe for my
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Sorry
yeah.
to spoiler.
No, please.
What a great introduction. I feel like we've really got a picture of how amazingly diverse and active your projects are. Where's it going from here? What do you see coming up? Any changes?
I think the one thing that's interesting is that like um the three of us, the three of us are people that are always interested in upending what we think we know about systems, from journalism to organized religion to education, municipal governance. Like that's the work that we do in everything else. And as folks who currently own a food service establishment, a small business, we are both learning from our staff and from the industry and from our mentors all the time about what that means, and then also thinking differently about what that could mean for us. So like one of the first ways that I connected with Andrea years ago was because when she co-founded City Bureau, they had this kind of like lateral leadership model. And that's something that, we had a really great meeting with our staff last week, and we just talked about, one of the questions we had for them was, what does leadership of the shop look like in the future? And it's very it's very humbling and liberating to do something where we are not experts in what we are doing. We are constantly learning, Googling, asking questions, making mistakes. And we have an amazing staff, many of whom have been with us for 7 years, 8 years, which is amazing. I mean, not many coffee shops can say that they have a barista that's been there for 7 years supporting them. And so they are very honest with telling us the things we need to know about how to do better at our job as owners. And so I think it's very humbling and liberating to be in this space of being learners, being kind of open and transparent learners, and people who, because we're not making any money from the shop, we're not like, it allows us to have other kinds of things as motivations for the things that we do. So yeah, I think, we closed the sale in June. So we just passed our 6 month at the end of June. So we just passed our 6 month mark owning the shop. And so, 2026, that will be, inshallah, that's like our first complete year of owning it. And so being able to look at the seasons, the rhythm of the seasons, events, all those types of things is really exciting for us.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to sort of switch gears because you all individually do so many interesting things and are involved with so many great projects. I'd love to give each of you a moment to tell us about them. And maybe we'll start with you, Trina, with your Invisible Institute. I know you do something called Not Me, We.
Oh, yes. So I think one, like, the Invisible Institute is also based in the experimental station. And so like as it's connected to
Sorry, Trina, do you want to say what experimental station is? Because we haven't said that. Yeah.
Please.
The experimental station is a large building that kind of over time it has like incubated projects, but it's now like a place where people rent office space, but they also have some like nonprofit programming, like a Blackstone Bicycle Works, and City Bureau was once located in there. Southside Weekly is there, which is a newspaper There's an architectural firm that's there, and then Invisible Institute and some other folks like along the periphery. You know, when I joined the Invisible Institute, I joined in 2016. So it was literally right as Build was being built. Like, I remember when it was B-Gab's Goodies back in the day, which is a other like vegetarian space that I love and adore. And so I feel like I really grew up in the building. When I started at the Invisible Institute, I was working with the Youth Police Project, just referencing that image of the young person interviewing me, where we just talked to young people about the police and like their rights. And so there was a UChicago law student there, a few, there was a lawyer there. We're doing role play. We're not saying to the young people, like, this is how you must feel about the police. We're saying, how do you feel about the police? How do police show up in your life? And then we talk about their constitutional rights within the process, and just even like the way that democracy, right, in the process. And so from there, you know, went to grad school, and I became really interested in deepening this inquiry, investigating sexual assault by police. And around that time, I was exposed to some like databases, data infrastructure, and just like data science in general, that basically helped me to understand that we didn't only have to look at police sexual assault. There are these other contexts and circumstances where policing shows up in people's everyday lives. And often when we think about police violence, it is like somebody died, you know, it's not like there was, you know, someone was seeking help and then police, you know, criminalized them or harmed them in this process. And so the Invisible Institute goes way back to public housing, and is the reason why in Illinois, police misconduct records is public information. There was a woman in Stateway Gardens who was assaulted by a group of officers in the early 2000s, and she filed a lawsuit against the city of Chicago. And by way of her lawsuit, not only did she receive a settlement, which I feel, and she also, when interviewing her today, was not justice, truly. She also, you know, by way of her case, police misconduct records became public information. At the same time, so I live in South Shore. I was born and raised really in an apartment in South Shore. My grandparents were there. I'm there now. And as a community member of South Shore, I am a part of a nonprofit organization called Southside Together, which was formerly STOP and Not Me, We, two separate organizations, and I'm just on the board. Ultimately, like, this organization, when ICE came to Chicago and like helicoptered onto a building, one of those the building, I feel like, was a building in South Shore, 90% Black. Folks were pulled out of their homes at like 3 a.m. You know, it was horrible. And like members of Southside Together were on the ground nearly immediately, you know, or in the morning, and like had done some reporting on it, and also just like was just gathering information and just working with the tenants who were ultimately about to be and have now since then been displaced. And so like, you know, yeah, my projects, honestly, like, I'm a community member at heart. I'm born and raised in Chicago. And so like, that's a really deep part of my identity. When I think about many of my projects, I think about how it's like really geographically based. It's like, I am in Woodlawn, I am in Hyde Park, I am in South Shore, and like, what are the ways that the exchange of information, the gathering of people, and also like the sensitive conversations can play a role in our like collective evolution. I think my last piece on this is like, my philosophy in the data science piece is that like, there are so many of us with these shared experiences that we're just not aware of all the time, just because like things can be so disjointed. But it's my belief through like narrative justice and data sciences, in data science, we can see and acknowledge the things that we have in common, and respect the things that we don't, you know what I mean? Without playing Oppression Olympics and doing all the things. It's like, this is your lived experience. I want to respect that. And also, this is my, you know, taking into consideration the way that our individual experiences impact our collective ones. That's me.
Fantastic. Thank you. And so well spoken. Really great to hear. Let's segue over to you, Andrea. And I know you do things like Labor and Love, and I think you were involved in making zines yourself and a number of other projects.
Oh yeah, that is just the Labor and Love is my like hidden, but apparently not hidden very well, Substack that is a sort of a combination of me. So when I left Chicago for divinity school, I truly was burned out, and needed to make sense of why I was being pulled to do spiritual organizing work. And so some of it has a combination of my writing from when I was doing media-based organizing work, so more like commentary on journalism and how do you democratize journalism and disrupt like the traditional systems that or traditional media. And then I also had a delightful opportunity to like write more in divinity school creatively for the first time. I became a Quaker. I entered into a 12-step program. And so I was trying to make sense of a lot of that. And so that space is where I have all of my kind of like musings and writings and updates. I currently, one of the main things that I do is my day job where I do resource organizing for Access Reproductive Care Southeast. We are the largest abortion fund in the South. We are the only abortion fund in the state of Georgia. And we serve the states of Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And it's more than actually, let me back up a little bit. How I got into doing this work, like moving from media-based organizing to reproductive justice, was through divinity school. I took this class, decolonizing spiritual care, and there was somebody circulated an email after that this statewide reproductive justice organization called Healthy and Free Tennessee was launching a transformative justice collective because they were trying to get involved in more explicit abolition work and understanding the intersections of policing and both like policing communities generally, in addition to policing reproductive health specifically. And so we were one of the things that we did, or what I joined into for 4 years was getting trained to do accountability, transformative justice accountability processes in instances of sexual assault and violence. So as an alternative to policing, so that communities could stay together or work through harm. And so um, it felt really divine in the sense that I was trying to understand, like I didn't want to give up all of my organizing and facilitating experience that I had, but I was trying to make sense of it more in a different context and like outside of media. And so there was a lot that was happening at that time that really just led me to kind of go deeper into reproductive justice work. And so then eventually I landed at ARC Southeast and sort of said goodbye to working in journalism, although I still do like media-based organizing type work. But yeah, so I was a part of that collective for 4 years. We were trained by disability justice and transformative justice activist Mia Mingus, amongst a cast of others. And it was just incredibly helpful because my desire to do chaplaincy. So for people who don't know, like typically you encounter a chaplain in a hospital, usually when you're dying, or you encounter a chaplain perhaps in the military or in prisons. And so as Eve was kind of talking about earlier, perhaps it's because I was born a twin. I really don't love being an individual leader. I lead from the middle. I lead collectively. It's always been my jam. And so, I was never interested in pastoring a church. I was really interested in chaplaincy because you meet people where they're at, and you're really helping facilitate, oftentimes making meaning of really incredibly hard experiences. And so two things that I got to do as a divinity school student was one, I ran a weekly workshop series at the women's prison in Nashville, that was kind of a mix of like a creative studio and a recovery space. And then eventually I was at the program for LGBTQ health. Sorry, we love our alphabets, the queers. The At Vanderbilt, it doesn't exist anymore, for a variety of reasons that are kind of crappy, but basically, my role was to provide spiritual and emotional care for people seeking gender affirming procedures at the hospital. And the week that I started, conservative political pundit. I could call him a lot of other things, but I'll keep it to that. Matt Walsh decided to target the very program that I was working with, accusing the program of mutilating children. It wasn't. Basically, he had tried to target Boston a hospital in Boston, and they resisted his target. Vanderbilt, being in the Bible Belt, did not. And so it was a really intense moment. And it was this wild combination of like, okay, I'm trying to teach people about media literacy and how the information they're getting is not accurate while trying to help a patient make sense of, how, perhaps a non-affirming nurse that maybe got a piece of misinformation. And so Divinity School really did what I thought it would do and turn my world upside down, and led me into doing more reproductive justice work. And I'm continuing figuring out where chaplaincy fits for me in terms of like death doula work and things like that. But basically, what happened was when I left Chicago, I think I learned that I had bad boundaries, and my whole life was like my personal, professional, political was all in one place. And so I've worked to try to separate that out. And so the chaplaincy piece feels like very sacred. It's on the side. It's not how I make my money. It's how I live my life and pursue the work of my life and the work that my soul must have, as womanist Katie Cannon would say. And then repro is it feeds into some of that, but I feel very grateful to kind of have a little bit of separation. And yeah, and that's that. And then Chicago is everything to me, and I always wanted to have a place back home that wasn't a house, and so it worked out for me. But yeah.
Oh, Cole, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I had to sneeze, so I muted myself. But thank you, Andrea. That was really amazing to hear all that. And Eve, let's hear from you. I know you do lots of things from uh, comic books to writing workshops to cultural organizing.
Yeah, I'm kind of like basking in the glow of everything that Trina and Andrea just shared, so I'm a little less prone to speaking than I usually am, which is usually very prone to speaking. Yeah, so where to begin? So I do a lot of stuff. Like Trina and Andrea, I was born and raised in Chicago, and I think that something I'm hearing in each of where we're coming from is like being at a moment of reflection vis-a-vis the things that poured into us and how we became the people that we are. Internal reflection of like thinking about the people that we want to be in the next chapter of our lives, and then looking outward at what is our role in building the structures to help other people be, what they are and what they want to be. So for me, I grew up in Chicago, and I became a Chicago public school teacher when I was very young, when I was 22 years old. I was a baby, paid by the state to take care of other people's babies. And I'm also a writer, I'm an author. And I would say that those two things, being a teacher, being an educator it's a caretaker profession. And so it's deeply politicized and deeply political. And at the same time, is like my entry into the professional world was being like, you're in charge of caring for somebody's child. And so I feel like that kind of shapes my political orientation towards the world, and something that we all share from these different perspectives is like this orientation towards care as being both implicitly political and as like a worthy end unto itself. And so another thing about me is that I have to my surprise and through kind of like statistical improbability have become a pretty successful author. And so, sorry, it's 1 o'clock, so all my alerts are going off about calendar things. So, okay, disregard, disregard. I don't even believe in linear time. Um, I've, pretty successful author. And I'm also a professor at the University of Chicago, which is where I went for undergrad, and like almost dropped out a lot of times. And so I became a successful author. I don't have an MFA. I actually have never taken a formal writing class past high school. The last like creative writing course that I took was from Mr. McGrath, in his like senior creative writing high school course. And so, um, And so but I like have these successful books and stuff. And so m much of my training, such that it is as a writer, came from community spaces and from mentors who were not formal teachers, right? So Avery R. Young, who just concluded his tenure as the first poet laureate of Chicago, is like one of, he's my uncle, like he's one of the most important teachers of my life. Um, and a lot of that happened through the organization Young Chicago Authors, through another nonprofit called Gallery 37, which is now After School Matters, and all these spaces where I was able to kind of build an identity of what it meant to be a writer, outside of, like, often alongside kids who'd been widely failed by institutionalized schooling spaces, kids who dropped out of high school, kids that were not living at home for various reasons. Um, and so being at this, and a lot of those folks that I grew up with, those are my besties. Those are the people I talk to every single day. And so, so what does it mean to be in this season of my life and to think about what is my role in building and sustaining the infrastructure that is needed to have a healthy literary ecosystem, which for me, a healthy literary ecosystem has to also be like a healthy, nourished community ecosystem. One of my North Stars as a writer is Gwendolyn Brooks, who was the first Black person to win the Pulitzer Prize. Now I get to hang with a Pulitzer Prize winner every day. This was pretty cool. Gwendolyn Brooks was a deeply committed community person. And, I've done a lot of archival work in her archives and, read the letters of invitation sent to her by the same schools where she would go give their eighth grade graduation speech every year, where she would, out of her pocket pay for poetry competitions for seventh graders, for eighth graders, the letters that she received from people all over the country. And so I think that, like, my identity as like a person who's trying to use culture to build political collective power, which is how I would define being a cultural organizer, as an educator, and then as a writer who's not I'm not a like Ernest Hemingway, like sit alone in my attic type of writer. I'm like a go out and do stuff with people type of writer. So I think that Build is a place that allows for the sustenance of all those identities. One other thing I'll mention really briefly, man, when they were talking, I was like, wow, they're both just riffing. What am I gonna say? Now I'm just riffing. But I think one thing we haven't talked about is like food justice, which is really important to all of us. And the building that we're situated in, the experimental station that Trina mentioned, has a lot of other things going on that are oriented around food justice. And food justice and food sovereignty is something that I think is important to all of us from different angles and means different things. I think for us as people, all of who've known food insecurity and precarity at different parts of our lives, that is part of food justice. Like, food justice isn't just about having organic food, it's also about like your relationship to your food, access to your food, access to food, period. Trina has these chickens that she'd be raising, and something that she said that stuck with me is like part of why she raises chickens is that she wants kids who live around her to understand chickens, like to know where eggs come from and know where chicken comes from. Um, and we've already established that she's just like, a neighborhood lady, like. And for me, food justice, I do a lot of baking, and I do a lot of baking in support of political relationships in my own immediate neighborhood, and as a way of like engaging in exchange with my neighbors, which I do believe like builds our resilience for the eventual Butlerian catastrophe, where like in order to know that I can I'm Butlerian in the Octavia Butler sense, like in order for me to know that I can rely on my neighbors when it becomes a parable of the sower situation, that begins not with like, let's have a meeting or like, let's do a 10-point plan. Like in my political practice, that begins with like, I made cookies for you. Um, and so we get to the 10-point plan, but you have to have cookies for the meeting. So, for me, I'm working on a book. The poems that I started our conversation with, that book is like filed and done with the illustrator. And the project I'm working on now is actually about bread and bread in the social world. And so I'm a cultural organizer, but I'm also a cultural organizer in that last weekend I was just giving out sourdough starter at the shop, and we did this thing called the starter pack. And the starter pack is everything. All the programs I design have to have like a fun, goofy name. I was a middle school teacher, so I have no shame about like a kitschy thing. And so starter pack was like, come to build build on Saturday morning. And if you have sourdough starter, give it away. And if you want sourdough starter, come get some. And I printed out like a one sheet care. Oh yeah, and I wore a starter jacket, except it was really hot. So, so I had to take off the starter jacket. But the starter jacket was essential. Thank you, Andrea. And Andrea was out of town. I had to borrow somebody else's starter jacket. I was like, if Andrea were here, I know that I would have the vintage Bulls starter jacket of my dreams. But alas, you do what you have to do. Um, so, that thing that seems kind of like silly, like it means that I actually just had conversations about food and about sustainability with neighbors for like 2 hours. And there were neighbors who came in and they're like, I know how to make bread. I just need this starter. And then folks that were like, I don't know anything about, like, I have zero knowledge about this. And to me, it's an act of tenderness to sit and be like, I'm giving you actually a living thing, like actually a small living community that you're now responsible for. And I'm going to teach you how to care for this community. And then this community, if you take care of it, can make food for you. And you can and also it will like multiply itself so that you can come back and see me again in a couple of months and you can be the one giving and somebody else can receive. Like that to me is mutual aid. And so I think that, yeah, I don't know. We just be doing stuff. And I think that it's really great to have an excuse in a space. And Andrea and Trina are very permissive, and the staff is very permissive. Where I'm like, I asked our chef, like, just to make sure that we wouldn't be in violation of any food safety protocols or anything. So to be clear, Bill, we were not selling this particular food item. We were hosting a neighborly exchange of others giving these things away. But yeah, that's what I do. I bake bread and I try to be a good teacher and a good reader and good writer.
Thank you all so much, above all, for all the work you do. It just clearly is changing communities
It's
and
so
making
fun though.
communities.
I mean, thank you, but we're not like we're not sacrificing. Like we're we're having I mean, we are sort of. I have to like go negotiate with our produce supplier later because he's been shorting us on milk. So like that is not fun. Or like especially intellectual. But like just to be clear, we are having a grand time.
Yeah.
And that is clearly what oils all the workings. Humor, too, seems to be a really strong suit with everybody. Thank you very much for this conversation and just telling us all about these great things. And I'm sure there are some questions or comments from our audience. So I'm going to turn it over to Joshua and say, take it
Yes,
away.
thank you all so much for that wonderful conversation. If you have a question in the audience and you'd like to submit, there's a link in the chat where you can do so. We have a couple questions ready to go here, though. The first one, Eve, I think you may have spoken to this a little bit, but for the entire group, how has your involvement with Build impacted your personal practices, be they writing, spiritual, or research?
For me, like the coffee thing, like the taste of coffee and having a delicious coffee and taking the first sip of a coffee is like doing a deep meditative breath, like I'm smoking a cig outside in the cold. But not to say that I'm promoting that, but just say like that's the feeling, and it's so good. But it is a drug and it's caffeine. But I think like the biggest ways that like initially come to mind is like on the nourishment piece, like on my worst day, even before owning Build, I would come to Build and like I would experience like a level of like love and security. And like chef has asked before, like, what am I feeding you today? What are you having today? With me unprompted, and I'm having such a bad day, and I'm like tears come to my eyes because like I know that I have not nourished my body just because of the level of strain and stress, just like the kind of work that I'm doing has. And so it has really like impacted the way that I am like nourishing and feeding myself, just a reminder. And so I feel like that's the biggest piece is that like that reminder and the science of it all, like appreciating a delicious something, because like the intentionality chef has this like philosophy around how like food is love, and like that has played a big role in just like in the way that I've decided what am I putting into my body. And so that's been really big.
I can go. Yeah, in many, many ways. Like we used to joke because the public newsroom was weekly that it was like our version of church. And that was way before I ever thought I was going to go to divinity school. So I think that played a little bit of a role in that trajectory. I mean, it absolutely did. So I was in Mississippi because now they're mid-career journalists, but they were early career then, wanted to bring the public newsroom to the Delta in Mississippi. And so it quite frankly, like, yeah, being in build and having that fertile soil to grow something out of really changed my life in that trajectory in terms of thinking about how I organize and where I do organizing work. I think also like it's just a reminder of just how important it is to have these kinds of spaces, big or small, where anybody can show up and build relationship and build something. Sometimes in those workshops we'd have like, 40 people, sometimes we'd have five, and it was always really meaningful and very important. And so I think that's something else that I feel like that continues in build, even if there's not a workshop happening, just in a slow day and a big day, like people are connecting with one another. And so that feels really important to me. And a reminder of that in how I show up in the work that I do or where the kinds of work that I do. And then also, so this is sort of a little bit of what Trina was speaking to, but that like it is a very practical space. Like I think it's like it is very, I think, and Eve was saying this a little earlier, that like people feel kind of isolated or we're not as connected in some ways, but to have a space where you're going to get good coffee, you can get a good book, you can get really good food. I think for me, I got really burned out by like nonprofits growing to a size of where they were just doing abstract work. Like they were really just doing a lot of marketing, not like meeting material needs. And I think that part of what drew me back to build, and even what put me into ARC, was that like there is a material reality that we live in, and to ignore it feels absolutely dangerous, especially right now. And so I think for me, it's a space that also reminds me, like, what does it mean to be really present in this moment and in the fluctuations of these moments in society, and to be offering something really consistent and practical to people, and why that is sort of the North Star of my work. And I think just like letting things emerge, like what I admire about Trina and Eve's work, and what I love about Build is that we will let it sit for a little bit. Like it doesn't, we're not saying all the things we're going to do right now because we want to see how the collective will hold it and what emerges. And I think that's always been true of Build, and it's like true of our work individually. And that's another sort of important lesson for me, is that, I always say like urgency is the devil unless it's a medical emergency. And so some of that also is something else that I think about in terms of how Build has influenced me.
Yes, snaps to that. I think that, just to pick up on something Andrea said about like the material environment, there's a way that I think especially for like speaking for myself and Trina, just for Black people, there's a way that like business ownership is very mystified and is seen as like a panacea, like Black-owned businesses, Black-owned businesses. And it's like it being a business owner is not, whoever you are, is not like you just wake up every day and someone like sprinkles confetti over you, like congrats on being a business owner. Like there's so many, especially for something that has to do with food, right? Like not service, not abs, like we sell things to people. And we sell things to people both that have been ordered, like books and cards and stickers, and things that people are making, like transmogrifying before your very eyes, right? Coffee, we are selling people a chemical reaction that is done by an expert, right? And so there's so much material in that I think there's a quote that I love from Audre Lorde about the idea that like most people operate at the level of bread concern, right? And that is there's a day that I'll never forget where I had a conversation with one of our staff members about the price of chips, like how much we sell chips for. And we sell chips for $1.50, or you can get, if you're a young person, you can get two for $2. And I was like, should chips be $2? I don't know. And we'd had this conversation within a week. A teenager came in their high school uniform, and I was at the register, and and she was like, how much for two bags of chips? And I was like, well, you can get two bags of chips for $2. And Well, they're $1.50, and she said, "How much for two?" I said, "You can get them for $2." And she stood there and she was counting how many dimes she had. She's like, "I think I have 20." She had 20 dimes. And I was like, "Man, it's really important because she don't got 30 dimes. She has 20 dimes." Okay. So we can talk separately about, do I want to be selling chips to kids? That's like a different conversation. But I'm meeting this young person where they are, and she's got these 20 dimes, right? And so, like, watching somebody count that out, or having an older person come in and ask me how much coffee is, and I tell them, and she's like, "I can't do that." I'm like, "All right, what can you do? Like, where can we meet each other?" We give away a lot of coffee. There have been times when we have to close the shop because we have a meeting, and we just like put a coffee pot outside so that if you came and you're like, "I just really needed this coffee today," we're like, "Just help, just take some coffee," right? So we have this very material thing. Anyway, to answer the actual question about my practice, I, for many, many years, have been like on my high horse about how important it is to be a learner. I've said already that being an educator is very central to my identity. I've been an educator for 20 years, in some way, in some form or another. I've been an educator in public schools and in after school spaces and in prison and in college and with master's students and PhD students and 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds and all types of people. And I think that no matter what type of education you want to offer, it's really important to maintain the posture of a learner. So I'm always trying to do stuff that I'm kind of bad at. I started learning the piano in 2020, and learning the piano in your late 30s. I'm like, you want me to do two different things with my hands at the same time? Like, that's impossible, right? Something that a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old can learn so quickly is so hard for me. So I talk about that a lot. And at the same time, I'm, blessedly at a position, surprisingly to me, at a position in my life where in a lot of the things that I do, I'm regarded as an expert, right? So I'm a tenured faculty member. I'm a author who gets to serve on, judge prizes and things like that. I'm not, in most of my professional life, it is not honest to regard myself as emerging any longer. And so, being in this space where, the folks that nominally like work for us or work under us are frequently telling me very kindly that I'm wrong or that I did something wrong. Or, when I'm in the kitchen, I am constantly asking for direction. In a way that is, the way you have to do in a kitchen, which is like transparent, direct, and respectful. And then I'm willing to receive that direction. And so, the other day I was washing dishes because when you don't know anything, like when you're the least expert person in the kitchen, something that I know how to do really well is wash dishes, right? And I'm like like a certified, I have like my sanitation certificate and stuff like that. So I know, like, with the health inspector, like I know the correct way to wash dishes in a restaurant. And one of our staff members just handed me back a little carafe of milk where there was like a little milk spot that I had missed. And they handed it back to me and they were like, eh. That's all they said, like, eh. And I was like, you really missed an opportunity there to actually say in real life, like, you missed a spot. And they laughed. But, my job in that moment is like, just do it again. And I think that that is so important to so many things right now in my life and in our political world, just a willingness to be wrong and to mess up and to take direction. So I think for me, like, just having a place where I'm very much in the posture of a learner is really important. Sorry, that was one question. I'm also very caffeinated right now, in case you can't.
No, thank you so much for those thoughtful responses to that question. And so before we move into our closing reading, one last question. What are you all reading right now?
Well, can I give a shameless plug that everybody should? The bookshop links and the Libro links have already been shared in the chat, but like, you can get the same audiobooks you get on Amazon. You can get the same ebooks and same books shipped to you that you get on Amazon. Get them from us, and we do not pay money to train ICE. We do not collaborate with fascists, and you are actually supporting people in your community. So please, please, please order things from us. We'll get them from you, get them to you anywhere in the world. Trina, it looks like you have a visual aid, so I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'm gonna look for my visual aid.
Okay, I am reading a book called Children of Bondage, which was written in 1940. I've just started. This is the book. I believe it was $2. That's what it was, a selected publication of the American Youth Commission. And it is essentially the first line in one of the subject and its setting. It's, this book is an attempt to recreate the personalities and to describe the socialization of 8 Negro adolescents in the deep South of this country. And their cases were selected from 30 life histories of Negro children between the ages of 12 and 16 who live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and in Natchez, Mississippi. These 30 adolescents were interviewed several times weekly over a period from 4 to 7 months. And so this book was written in 1940. And so I'm just
By a Chicagoan, Allison Davis.
represent. And so yeah, that's what I'm on. How about you?
Allison, go ahead, Andrea.
Okay.
No, I have like 3, so you go first.
I just have 2. I'm listening to Forest Euphoria, The Abounding Queerness of Nature by Patricia Onaniwa. I can't remember how to say the last name. Kaishian? I can't remember. Correct me, whoever might know. And then the physical book I'm reading or rereading is The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. It's a series of essays that Insight put together in like 2007. So those are my 2 books.
Ah, so good. Okay, something I love about being a bookseller is I have a lot of opportunities to read outside of my interests because I need to read things to know if we should stock them. So I'm reading a book that's like a super bestseller right now called Kata Basis. I may be mispronouncing that, but it's by R.F. Kuang. I previously read Yellowface, which she wrote. Joshua, you're nodding. Do you know this book? Okay, great. It is a book about it is a book about it takes place in a world where the protagonist attends Cambridge as a PhD student. But in this world, Cambridge, in addition to having like math and physics and philosophy, they also have magic. And her advisor dies and goes to hell, and she has to go get him out of hell so that he can write her job recommendations, which is like the most academic story ever. So I'm reading that. It's not what I would normally be reading, but it's such a hit that it's like I have to be conversant in it. And then I'm really excited to be reading this book, Reading the Room by Paul Yamazaki. And this was published by our friends down the street at the Seminary Co-op bookstore on Woodlawn Avenue in Chicago. And they have a little small press. And it's kind of, he's a bookseller at City Lights Books, which is a very famous bookstore in San Francisco that some of you may know. So it's like basically an extended interview with him. And it's really great. And then lastly, I'll share that I just finished reading this book by Maddie Libchonsky, who's an absolutely amazing cartoonist who for many years has written for The Nib. You should follow them on Instagram if you like kind of like dystopian sci-fi trans comics. And this is their graphic novel that recently came out that also takes place in a dystopian future. So reading that. I'm reading like 5 other things, but those are some things that are. I usually do 1 audiobook, 1 library book, 1 print book, 1 smaller print book that I can carry with me, and 1 ebook at any given time.
Thank you so much for sharing the titles that you're spending time with. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the slides once more, and I'll pass it over to Trina.
So I'm just going to quickly read. This is a picture of Latanya Moore by Sebastián Hidalgo. She is holding an urn of her daughter, and this is a excerpt put together because I was like 5 minutes, but this one just about a little bit about Shantaya's story and the story of her mother. Some say it's simply a mother's intuition, a lump in the throat, or a throb in the heart that warns their child is in danger, even when police suggest otherwise. It guided Latanya Moore when her 26-year-old daughter, Shantaya Smith, still wasn't home as night fell May 28, 2018. It was out of character for her to not reach out, especially on a school night. More worried, officers would be dismissive if she called in. So her cousin suggested they head to a nearby 10th District police station. I wanted them to see my face so they could understand my concern was real, remembers Moore. It guided her, even as the officer at the front desk told her not to worry, she remembers. Maybe she's with a boyfriend, the officer suggested. It wasn't uncommon for young women like Smith to run off with a man. Give it 48 hours before filing the report, Moore remembers the officer saying. But she didn't want to give it 48 hours. She thought about 15-year-old Sadaria Davis, another girl who had gone missing in the neighborhood that spring, who was later found decomposed in a trash-strewn abandoned building. It was the latest in a spat of missing women and girls. In fact, the whole neighborhood was on edge. Moore's cousin, part of their tight-knit family group, was adamant the officer accept the report, and she said they would not leave the station without one. They mentioned Smith's bipolar disorder, which, unknown to the family at the time, meant police could have immediately characterized her case as at risk and started an investigation. Finally, officers told Moore her request was accepted. If she shows up, give us a call, officers told Moore. She wouldn't hear from them for the next 4 days. Years later, the abandoned garage where Shantaya Smith was found is torn down, and some neighbors still avoid the alley entirely. But in some ways, it feels like people have forgotten her, says Moore. The phone calls and visits are fewer and fewer, the likes on her social media posts almost non-existent. She is raising Smith's now 12-year-old daughter in rural Illinois, near the Iowa border, 140 miles from the city of her birth and her community. After she lost Smith, behind on her rent and close to eviction, Moore felt there was one choice: to leave the city that failed her. Today, she juggles her granddaughter's schooling and keeps a watchful eye over who the preteen speaks to online, which friends she surrounds herself with, and how she copes with her mother's desk. Sitting at the local diner this April, shoulders touching with her grandmother, the teenager taps and slides her fingers across her phone screen, playing a video game with headphones on as Moore describes how Smith's death has impacted both of them. She doesn't call me grandma, Moore says. She says I'm her mom because she doesn't want the kids at school to know her mom is deceased. While she shoulders her own grief, Moore tries her best to emulate the type of love that Smith poured into her every birthday celebration, school assembly, and report card, and the steadiness of their early morning strolls to school. She wanted her daughter to be something someday, Moore says of Smith. Later that month, Moore received an unexpected phone call from a West Side pastor who had helped her in the worst moments of her daughter's missingness. Would she be willing to sit on the state's first task force on missing and murdered women to speak truth to the issues that stole her daughter's young life? Her initial surprise at the invitation to sit among the state's top law enforcement brass and policymakers soon tumbled into contemplation. Could the Chicago Police Department really reckon with how it handles missing persons cases, the bias and stereotypes? Moore wondered what it would be like to finally tell police face-to-face the concerns she collected over the years. Mostly, she wanted top brass to acknowledge the racism that impacted how they handled her daughter's case, and to explain why they blamed Smith herself instead of finding who killed her. They need to stop thinking that everyone is into prostitution and drugs, she says. You don't know someone's story. In the end, she declined to join. Moore says the task force won't bring Smith back, even though she recognizes that solutions need to center survivors such as herself. Moore plans to find other ways to keep Smith's name and his story alive and find justice for her daughter. She prays it's a battle that will end before Smith's daughter becomes a woman. I am grieving, but I'm looking for closure. If I get closure, then I could rest, she explains. If not, if I don't ever rest, then I will take it to my grave. This is an excerpt from Missing in Chicago, Part 7. This Pulitzer Prize winner for 2024 local reporting, with Sarah Conway as my co-reporter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. It was just such a great conversation, and I think we're all going to take away a lot of inspiration.
Yes, just to echo Cole, thank you, Eve, Andrea, Trina. We'd also like to thank the Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these weekday conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. You can support our support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're available, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Marlene McCarty and Ksenia M. Soboliva on the event of Over the Brambles at Tabacalera. And as is Rail tradition, we now invite you to say goodbye as you leave today.
And thank you,
Bye.
Fong Bui.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Paul. Thank you, everyone at the
Thank
rail.
you.
Thank you so much. Paul,
Thank
again.
you,
Bye.
Trina. Thank you,
Thanks
Andrea. Thank you,
Yay,
Dee.
so
thank you,
much.
Chloe.
You, Ray, Bill,
Thank you,
copy and
Josh.
books. May it
Thank you.
thrive.
Bye,
In
everybody.
solidarity.
Love
Bye.
y'all. Bye.
Thank